As we age, changes come not only to the body, but also to the inner silence, which gradually turns into emptiness. Robert, a 67-year-old former history professor, lived alone in a house on the outskirts of the city. He once led a vibrant life, full of lectures, debates, travel, and friendly gatherings. But after retiring and losing his wife, everything seemed to fade away. He ate, slept, read, and occasionally watched television. Everything appeared decent, even orderly. But within that apparent stability, there was no spark of interest or inner movement. Dr. Howard, a physician with over 30 years of experience, once called this condition silent resignation. Men, he said, too often retreat into silence, believing it's just a natural part of aging. They don't complain, don't say they feel lonely, and often don't even realize they've lost touch with a vital part of themselves. But intimacy isn't just about partnership or physical closeness as such. It's about whether you feel your body, whether you listen to it, whether you sense your own aliveness. Robert wasn't ill, but something inside him was fading. He stopped taking care of himself, not because he didn't care, but because he didn't see the point. The inner flame that once lifted him from bed with interest in the day ahead wasn't dying from old age, but from silence. And this silence wasn't peace. It was withdrawal. Withdrawal from touch, desire, joy. Not because he didn't want those things, but because he believed he wasn't supposed to. Dr. Howard said, when a person stops responding to their body, they start losing themselves. And that's not a metaphor. Modern studies show that decreased intimate activity leads to poor circulation, hormonal imbalance, memory decline, and loss of vitality. It's as if the life support system switches to standby mode. The brain, muscles, and heart all wait for a signal that life is still happening, but that signal must come from the person themselves. Age, status, and loneliness do not mean everything has to stop. Aging isn't a sentence. It's just a phase. And even when it feels like everything is frozen, it's possible to come back. Start small, with the sensation of skin, breath, the warmth of simple movement. It's important to remember, you are still you. Your body hasn't left. It's just waiting. Waiting for you to say again, I remember you. I'm here with you. Men are rarely told that intimacy is not a whim, not a leftover from youth, but a natural, biologically essential need. Dr. Howard, who dedicated decades to working with elderly patients, often noted with sadness how frequently older men lost connection with their own bodies simply because they thought, that's no longer meant for me. But the body doesn't know age. It's alive. It wants to move, to breathe, to feel. Intimacy is like sunlight for a plant. If you draw the curtains, everything slowly withers. One of the most memorable cases for Dr. Howard was Frank, a former firefighter, strong and proud, who at 69 looked younger than his age. But his eyes were empty. He had no serious illnesses. His tests were within normal ranges. Still, he felt constant fatigue, anxiety, and mental fog. One day, he admitted, I just don't feel like a man anymore. Ever since I've been alone, it's like I've been turned off. The doctor didn't judge. He calmly explained that withdrawing from intimacy, even in solitude, triggers a cascade of physical changes. Blood circulation slows, especially in the pelvic area. Nerve endings weaken. Testosterone production decreases. Apathy sets in. Everything is connected. Hormones, brain, heart, mood. This isn't psychology. It's physiology. A man who loses contact with the intimate side of life slowly disconnects his inner battery. Not abruptly, but gradually, almost imperceptibly. And at some point, he no longer understands where the sadness is coming from. Frank found it hard to believe he could change anything. He thought that after 60, all that no longer mattered. But Dr. Howard suggested starting small, simply not turning away from himself, to give himself permission, not to wait for someone else to say, "You have the right to feel." He had to say it himself. Because as long as the body is alive, it can be awakened. It can come back to life. A few weeks later, Frank had changed. Not because he had regained his youth, but because he had regained his self-respect. He started sleeping better, smiling more, feeling more energized. Regular, intimate activity, even alone, became his way of saying to himself, "I'm still here. I haven't given up." And it wasn't selfishness or naivete. It was self-care, the most mature, conscious kind of care. The body doesn't ask for much. It asks for attention, and when a man gives himself that attention, he reconnects with life. One of the most damaging myths that keeps men from staying connected with themselves is the belief that pleasure is only possible with a perfect erection. This idea, deeply rooted in our culture, has stolen years of sensuality and joy from millions of older men. Harold, a former Marine, once came to Dr. Howard with a heavy heart. He was 71, lived alone, stayed in good physical shape, but felt cut off from the life he used to know. "I've tried, but nothing works. It's over," he said, barely able to meet the doctor's eyes. Dr. Howard listened attentively. Then he gently explained, "Orgasm and erection are two different mechanisms. One depends on blood vessels, the other on the nervous system and the brain. Even if your body has changed, pleasure hasn't disappeared. It's different now, softer, slower, but still very much available." For Harold, this was a revelation. He had believed that if he couldn't perform like before, then it meant he couldn't at all. But the doctor explained that mature intimacy isn't about reaching a goal. It's about being present, feeling warmth, closeness, even without the classic physiological response. The path back to himself wasn't quick. Harold had to relearn how to listen to his body, how to let go of tension, how not to judge the experience. He stopped expecting things to be like they used to be and allowed himself to be open to something new. Touch, breath, calmness. These became sources of pleasure unrelated to youthful urgency. And it was deeper, because he no longer had anything to prove to himself or to some imagined audience. He simply gave himself permission to be alive. Many older men are afraid even to talk about this. They're afraid it's shameful, that it's something you're supposed to stay silent about. But silence kills. It steals a man's sense of self-worth. And yet intimacy, even in solitude, remains a way to say, "I'm still here. I'm not dead. I can feel." For Harold, returning to this part of life wasn't just about restoring function. It was about restoring dignity. He realized he could still be in touch with his desires, with his body. And that gave him confidence, not only in intimacy, but in everyday life. He became softer, more attentive, calmer. Because when a person allows themselves to feel, they become truly alive. Even if they're alone, even if the body has changed. What matters is not abandoning yourself. When we talk about intimacy, we usually think of the body. But we forget. The soul also needs touch. Attentive, warm, accepting. Physical activity strengthens muscles, while intimacy nourishes the inner light. When a man loses it, he loses not only a physiological function, but also his sense of worth. George, a former architect, lost his wife after 40 years of marriage. He considered himself strong, managed the household, went for walks, stayed in touch with his children. But something inside him had withered. Not all at once. First came insomnia, then irritability, and eventually apathy. He didn't complain, just lived the best he could. But he laughed less and fell silent more often. At an appointment with Dr. Howard, he said, "Maybe it's just age. I've lived my life." The doctor listened carefully, without interrupting. Then he said something that changed the tone of the conversation. "You're still living, George. That means it's not over. And just like the body, the soul remembers the touch." George waved it off, saying it was silly to think about such things past 70. But the doctor spoke differently. Intimacy isn't about sex. It's about connection with yourself, your body, and the warm part of life. Scientists confirm regular sexual activity, even in solitude, reduces cortisol levels, improves sleep, and stabilizes mood. But more importantly, it restores the sense of "I exist." When a man gives up this part of his life, he's erasing a vital edge of his identity. At first, George didn't know where to begin, but the doctor advised him not to set any goals. Just be with himself. No rush, no judgment. To breathe, to touch his skin, to feel the warmth of his hands, to rediscover his body, not as a tool, but as a part of himself, worthy of respect. Several months passed. George didn't become a different person, but he returned to himself. He started listening to music again, noticed small details, called his friends more often. He told the doctor, "I feel like I'm part of the world again. Not a shadow, not silence, a person." And this wasn't about youth. It was about life. Intimacy is not weakness. It's not shame. It's the courage to be yourself, even if you're alone, even if everyone around you stays silent. And if you're reading these words today, know this: it's never too late to begin. You are alive, and you have the right to feel. Not because someone expects it from you, but because you deserve it. As long as your heart is beating, your soul is waiting for a touch.